Hey everyone, here's another media dropping. This one comes from Max Boot, a columnist for the Washington Post and a fellow for the Council on Foreign Relations, who never met a war he didn't want to jerk off all over his dark gray fedora. Boot has a history as a neoconservative, and in this column timed to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, every neocon's favorite holiday, Boot writes the war on terrorism has succeeded, but through a marvelous inversion of the truth. More Americans are dying of COVID-19 every 2 hours than died of Islamist terrorism in the United States during the past 20 years. The fact that millions of people are dying from a deadly virus all over the world is proof that he and his gumshoe reporter hat have been right all along about the terrorism. Boot concedes that the Iraq War was a blunder. It gave rise to ISIS. The war on Afghanistan was marred by numerous wrong turns, in his words, and the use of torture was an abomination, all of which, at some point or another, Boot supported or justified. Just watch him on C-SPAN in December 2003, defending the Iraq War.
Wonderful. I think it's too early to say what the final outcome is going to be, but I think it's certainly premature to call what we've done there a failure. In fact, there have been a lot of successes, and I suspect after the capture of Saddam Hussein, people will be a little less quick to label it a failure prematurely. I think there were some exaggerations made by the administration, by the intelligence community, and by others, but that doesn't negate the basic case for the war, which is that Saddam was a danger down the line. We know that he has tried to get weapons of mass destruction in the past. He certainly had the capability to manufacture and acquire them in the present. This is probably the most humanitarian thing that any country has done in the last 50 years. This is a tremendous step forward for human rights. We have liberated the Iraqi people from a horrible tyranny that was keeping them in bondage for many decades.
According to Boot, most of the excesses of the war on terrorism were curbed under Bush and Obama. He says what was left was a more modest and humane counterterrorism policy. But Obama decriminalized torture, revived military commissions, endorsed indefinite detention without charge or trial for 46 Guantanamo prisoners. He maintained prisons in Afghanistan like Bagram, where prisoner abuse occurred, and he believed the War Powers Act did not apply to the killing of terrorism suspects with remote-controlled warfare anywhere around the world. Boot celebrates how the no-fly list went from 16 names on the day of 9/11 to 81,000 names by 2016, without displaying any sort of awareness of how it disproportionately targets Arabs, Muslims, or South Asians, who have no nexus to terrorism whatsoever. He disregards also how the FBI put people on the list when they refused to act as informants. This war-lusting pair of galoshes dismisses the evidence that drone strikes have incited terrorism while claiming terrorist plots were disrupted. To him, that's why 4 presidents from both parties have relied on drones. But a 2002 Stanford and New York University study found the number of high-level targets killed as a percentage of total casualties was extremely low, around 2%. The real reason presidents rely on drones is because it helps them avoid the political risk of sending young kids to die in a war, something Boot will never have to worry about because kids like his son do not live in the kind of poverty that pushes them to report for duty, bringing their parents great anxiety and stress that intensifies with each CNN update on the latest violence. Perhaps there hasn't been another 9/11 because there have been no shortage of U.S. targets in the Middle East, Afghanistan, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa, where conflicts have raged. Whatever the reason, Boot is laundering his reputation through the anniversary of 9/11, just like numerous neoconservatives have done over the past 20 years. It's an insult to the families of 9/11 victims, survivors, soldiers who have died in the global war on terrorism, soldiers wounded, those irreparably scarred by PTSD, not to mention the tens of thousands of civilians killed and maimed and the millions of refugees displaced by those who share Boot's ideology. As a fedora-wearing marionette for the warfare state once said,
Failure to recognize that evil exists in the world and that it has to be stopped before it comes back to haunt us is in fact the root of many of our current problems.
if we don't police the evil that lies within each paragraph of Max Boot's columns, then who will? It's a big task, but someone's got to do it. Thank you, and please remember to hit the subscribe button so you'll be the first to know when the next media dropping is posted.